Okay, welcome to the KingCast, presented by the Economics Division of the Social Sciences Department. I'm your host, Frank Roach. Welcome to the program. Happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Holidays to everyone else. Thank you for joining us as always. With me today, Nicole, Jake Murphy, Rahill Jaiswal, and our special co-host this week, Vice President of the Feminist Club at King, Catie Baer. Welcome to the show, Catie.
Thank you. I'm happy to be
Great to have you. Katie's class of 2022. As always, we're excited to be back with you for another KingCast. Our guest this week, Dave Mullen, Senior Project Manager for Bloomberg Index Systems. We'll be talking with Dave in a few minutes here into the show. On today's show, we check in on the Brexit update, getting close to the end of the year, still no deal. Catie Baer on the first female Vice President, Kamala Harris. What did we learn this week? Our fun segment, King Things in Sports. Our guest, David Mullen. The White House proposes more stimulus and, of course, economic data and the markets. As always, we start out with Nicole, bringing us our most important story of the day, the Brexit update. A lot of turmoil in the foreign exchange markets this week with sterling on the back of back and forth between the EU and the UK over the Brexit deal. French President Macron seems to be digging his heels on fishing. Nicole, tell us what's going on with Brexit. Is this thing going to work out or not? What do you got?
With the Brexit transition period ending on December 31st, British and EU leaders are scrambling to reach a resolution on several difficult issues. Recall that Brexit is short for British exit and refers to the United Kingdom's decision to leave the European Union. The European Union is a political and economic union of 28 countries that trade with each other and allow citizens to move easily between the countries to live and work. The UK is withdrawing following a vote in 2016 where 52% of the UK citizens voted to leave and 48% voted to stay. There's been ongoing discussion about whether the UK withdrawal from the EU would be a hard Brexit, or as Prime Minister Boris Johnson calls it, an Australia-style Brexit. A hard Brexit refers to a sharp break with the EU with no agreements in place to govern the UK's future relationships with the EU. There are three main issues that are being negotiated, which has been going on for about 6 months with little progress. One, which is fisheries, which involves the right of the EU boats to fish in UK waters. Two, whether the EU competition rules to ensure a level playing field will apply to the UK, including rules on workers' rights, environmental protections, taxation, government aid. And three, governance of potential Brexit deal with a focus on how disputes, including the above issues, will be handled. Britain approaches a new deadline of Sunday, December 13th to strike a deal with the European Union. As they approach this new deadline, the pound closed out its worst week in 3 months. It has fallen by over 1% against the euro, dollar, and all other major currencies over the course of the past week, amidst fears that the EU and UK are preparing for a no-deal outcome. We'll know shortly whether an agreement will be reached. Either way, it feels like this will be a challenging time for the UK as it adjusts to life outside the EU, but certainly a hard Brexit will make it much more difficult. And this is being reflected in the exchange rate between the British pound and the euro, with the pound falling against the euro. Expect to see more volatility with the coming Brexit transition period deadline in the next few weeks.
All right, great report as always, Nicole. Let me put you on the spot a little bit. Based on the research you've been doing on this topic, you want to make a call for the end of the month? We're going to have a deal, or we're going to have no Brexit? No deal Brexit.
I personally think, and I studied this actually last year in my history class, and I saw a bright future for a deal, but right now I'm just not seeing any possibility for a deal.
Yeah, it doesn't look good for sure, and there's some obvious concerns. But one of the things we have to remind ourselves are people that are trying to export goods and services to the UK, what do they still want to do after December 31st? They still want to export goods and services to the UK, right? So there's going to be a way, right? The Germans want to keep selling stuff to the UK. The UK wants to sell stuff to the rest of the world. They'll work this out, and if nothing else, they fall back on WTO trade rules for a bit. It could be chaotic, but it shouldn't be as bad as the opponents suggest it will be. All right, great as always. Now I want to bring in our special co-host, Catie Baer. She is the Vice President of the King Feminist Club. And of course, there's exciting times in the political world as a result of Kamala Harris becoming the first female Vice President in United States history. I know my sisters are very excited for this opportunity. I know female friends on the Democrat side and the Republican side are excited about this idea. And so it's going to be an interesting historical time for us. Catie, welcome to the show. Why don't you tell us about your thoughts and comments about Kamala Harris becoming the first female Vice President?
Thank you. It's very exciting as a woman personally, and I think it's exciting for more than just women alone. Kamala Harris was raised in a Christian and Hindu household, bringing more than just the Christianity and Catholic presidents and vice presidents, which is new in this history. Her parents actually immigrated to the U.S. before Kamala is born. So she is a Black and Indian woman. So that's more than just bringing color and bringing a woman and bringing new religions into the White House. It's really opening up a lot of possibilities and hope for more than just the minorities that have been kind of shut down in the White House in the past. She has had a past as with a law degree. As a young prosecutor, she specialized in prosecuting sex crimes and child exploitation. She co-sponsored a congressional bill to weaken the Religious Freedom Restoration Act to ensure that it is not used to permit discrimination in the name of religion. It has not passed, but I'm sure as vice president, she will work hard at that because she really cares about things like that and minorities who are oppressed in this system that we have in the government today. She was also the first Black woman elected as San Francisco's district attorney, and she started a program to provide first-time drug offenders to second chances with the opportunity to earn a high school degree and find a job. She was the first Black woman elected to be the California Attorney General, and she was overseeing the country's second largest justice department, only behind the U.S. Department of Justice. She has worked to protect Obamacare, helped win marriage equality for all, defended California's landmark climate change law, and won $1.1 billion settlement against a for-profit education company that scammed students and veterans. Kamala also fought for California communities and prosecuted transnational gangs who drove human trafficking, gun smuggling, and drug rings. She has held the Trump administration officials accountable with a powerful voice against Trump's conservative judicial nominations. She has been amazing for every woman and every minority, and she is really, really bringing hope to the table finally in the White House.
Okay, that's your report? Well done. Yeah, a really exciting time for sure. Now, unfortunately, President Trump hasn't quite given up yet, right? So there's still legal challenges going on for the Republican hopes to overturn the election. Nonetheless, that doesn't look very, very good right now. It doesn't look like that's going to happen. So eventually, of course, we'll get to the point where the president concedes. But one of the things that's interesting to point out is President-elect Joe Biden has said he's only going to be a one-term president. That really opens up the opportunity to have our first female president, which would be Kamala Harris, potentially, because she would obviously be the lead candidate in 2024 in the Democrat Party. What do you think of that, Catie?
I think it's really exciting because we saw that before with Hillary Clinton, although she did lose in 2016. We will see that opportunity come for women in future generations and future years. And it's really exciting to know that Kamala Harris was elected as vice president and Hillary Clinton got so far in the presidential race. So it's really opening up opportunities and hope for women and other minorities. It's not just women. We had the first Black president, and now we have the first Black vice president. So it's a very exciting time.
Good. There's a saying in politics, some of you may know, I was involved in politics for some years. When women run, women win. That is a saying. And of course, on the Republican side this year, many, many women ascended to the House and Senate. So really interesting times to be sure. All right, Catie, thank you for the wonderful report as always. Now it's time for our fun segment.
What did we learn this week?
All right, so Catie Baer, you're new to this what did we learn this week idea, okay? So I'm gonna let you go last. So give you a few minutes to think about what you learned. But our other three producers and co-hosts here are good at this. Jake, why don't you start us off this week? What'd you learn this week?
Well, this week in physics, and I know I do physics a lot.
You do physics a lot, yeah.
We're always learning new stuff in physics. We learned about rotations and periods of rotations and all stuff about that. And it's interesting how whenever you open a door, have you ever tried to open it from the wrong way and you feel like a fool? The reason it doesn't open is because of the torque required to open something on a rotational axis. So the farther away you are from the rotational axis, which is the hinges, the slower it'll open, but the less energy required to open it. And it's the same thinking and process behind, car jacks and all things like that. You get enough torque, you get enough rotation, and you can lift anything.
Okay, great. Last week you did the spinning bucket. And of course, give the shout out to the teacher as always. What's his name?
Yes, that is Mr. Hyatt.
Mr. Hyatt, good. Rahill, what'd you learn this week?
In math class, I learned how to find the horizontal and vertical asymptotes and then graph functions based off that.
Is that pre-calculus?
Yep.
Is that with Ms. Sheehan?
Yep.
I cover that class, and I was learning the same thing this week. Kind of complicated, I thought. I need to go back to algebra, I think. All right. Nicole, what'd you learn this week?
In my U.S. history class, we learned about Hamilton's plan to establish a national bank and have the government assume state debt from the northern states and sort of redistribute it to the entire country. And we learned how Jefferson opposed to that and sort of all the ongoing battles they had until Jefferson left Washington's cabinet and decided to run for president himself.
And what teacher?
Miss Ackley.
Exactly, yes. An important point in the first start of what we now today have as a central bank, right? That was the early start of our central bank. It didn't work out too well. The first couple efforts failed, but now we have, of course, the Federal Reserve. And back to you, Catie. What'd you learn this week?
In physics class, I learned about collisions and how there's the conservation of momentum, which I think is really cool, personally.
And I'm guessing the same teacher?
Mr. Nelson.
Oh, Mr. Nelson. Okay, good. We got it. We got a Mr. Nelson in there. Good. All right, so we got some diversity to our teacher background, our shout-outs. All right, and that is...
What did we learn this week?
Okay, always a fun segment to be sure. Now it's time to talk about our wonderful King community in the sports world. We're missing our guy, Jack Zipper, but Rahill, Jaiswal will take care of that. In the meantime, Nicole and Jake will tell us about King things.
This year, King donated 5,565 pounds of food, which is just over 2.75 tons of food. The team at Person to Person expressed their appreciation, noting, quote, "Person to Person and all of our clients can't thank the King community enough for making it such a priority."
Thank you once again to everyone who donated on Give King Tuesday. We not only achieved our community's goal of 500, the most donors ever on a single day, but also surpassed our previous highest dollar total from our inaugural Give King Tuesday back in 2016.
Friday, December 18th is early dismissal and ugly/holiday sweater day. Students who choose to may wear dress down with an ugly sweater or a holiday sweater. Those not participating in the dress down should come to school in the standard dress code for the day. Also, with the early dismissal, there will be no athletics, nor will there be lunch on that day.
Be sure to check out kingschoolct.org Upper School News for a really cool story on Mr. DeFelice's STEM project geared towards life science. Students are constructing a living, biologically cycling ecosystem. This story includes quotes from Paige Baird, Alessia Paz, Ian Marsh, Eliza Heaton, who are students who have been involved over the years.
Yeah, I heard about that project. Pretty cool. He's a great teacher, of course. All right, Rahill, tell us about sports. You're all on your own today.
Yep, so in the NFL, unfortunately for Mr. Roach, the Rams destroyed the Patriots 24-3 on Thursday night. The Rams defense was all over Cam Newton in New England, which included a 79-yard pick six in the second quarter, which was the beginning of the end. New England now sits 6-7, and their hopes of continuing the playoff streak are looking slimmer and slimmer. Meanwhile, the Rams sit atop the NFC West division with a 9-4 record. On Monday night, we have a classic AFC North rivalry game between the Browns and the Ravens. Cleveland surprisingly sits 9-3, while Baltimore sits 7-5. The Browns look to strengthen their grip on the wild card spot, while the Ravens look to get back into that seventh final playoff spot. Two NFL teams played each other earlier this season, with the Ravens winning easily 38-6. Both teams are also trying to look to put some pressure on the Steelers, who are getting closer to locking up the division crown. Now in the NBA, the start of the season is just around the corner as it tips off on December 22nd at 7 p.m. when the Nets play the Warriors. We finally get to see a healthy Kevin Durant play his former team. We also get a look at healthy Steph Curry and Kyrie Irving and see what they can do for their teams. Then at 10 p.m., the Clippers and the Lakers will renew their all-LA rivalry from last year. Kawhi and the Clippers look to rebound this season after that embarrassing 3-1 collapse to the Denver Nuggets. Speaking of the Clippers, they've locked up Paul George with a 5-year, $190 million max deal. Add that to George's original contract, and it comes out to 5 years, $226 million. That also leaves us asking what they plan to do with Kawhi Leonard before his player option next year.
Well, I'll tell you what, they're throwing some cash around the NBA, aren't they, Rahel? Holy cow, players these are record salaries, right, Rahel?
Yeah.
Yeah, just incredible. Good job if you know how to play basketball, right?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that great report as always. That is King Things in Sports. Always great to keep up with our wonderful King community. Now we bring on our guest. This week, we bring on our special guest, Mr. David Mullen, Senior Product Manager from Bloomberg Index System Limited, tasked with creating new fixed income derivative products tracking Bloomberg indices. David has been with Bloomberg for 23 years in fixed income analytics, launch new product lines, including e-trading of bonds and electronic creation redemption platform for fixed income ETFs. Sounds very complicated. ETF, the exchange traded fund. Mr. Mullen, welcome to the show.
Good morning, Frank. Thanks for having me.
Great to see you. I'm going to start off and I'll pass you over to the students because they want to ask you some great questions as well. Dave, we had something called LIBOR, the London Interbank Offered Rate, for many, many years. That was a benchmark interest rate for setting lots of rates around the world, in particular, U.S. Mortgage rates here in the United States on adjustable rate mortgages. A bunch of banks managed that LIBOR setting on a daily basis, and turned out to be they were manipulating the market. So LIBOR has been moved away. What is replacing? How are you involved in that?
Okay, great question. So just to give you some statistics, LIBOR, US dollar LIBOR, is referenced in $200 trillion worth of securities currently, 190 trillion of which is derivative securities like interest rate swaps. And the balance, 10 trillion, is basically referenced in consumer loans, commercial loans, which the consumer loans would include the mortgages that you talked about, as well as floating rate. And so this is a very, very important reference rate in the marketplace. And as you pointed out, there was manipulation. And so in 2014, the US Fed decided that they would move to a new rate, which couldn't be manipulated, that was based on transactions. And so they came up with something called SOFR, S-O-F-R, which stands for Secured Overnight Financing Rate. And it's based on overnight repo or repurchasing of Treasury securities. And that's very different than what LIBOR is or was. LIBOR was representing the proxy for bank borrowing. And the way a bank works is they want to make loans at an interest rate that's higher than where they borrow their money. They're always going to have a positive net interest income. And they don't use the repo market to fund themselves. They may use the repo market to invest in, but they use things like commercial paper, CDs, bank deposits, institutional deposits, retail deposits, home loan advances. They use a combination of those things to fund themselves. And since SOFR is really based on a securitized overnight rate, it doesn't really represent a good rate to lend off of. And in fact, in March of this year, when COVID struck, there was a great flight to quality in terms of the Treasury market, which drove repo rates lower, which drove the SOFR rate lower. At the same time, a concern that bank credit may be struggling because of all their loans. So the cost of borrowing for banks actually went up. So instead of a positive net interest income for a bank, they started to have negative net interest income. So the banking sector really started to push back on the Fed in terms of why should we use SOFR? And they want a new rate. They want something that reflects their credit spread and a forward term structure because they borrow for 1 month, 3 months, 6 months. And so Bloomberg has a great opportunity. And what we're working on is something called BSBY, B-S-B-Y, which stands for Bloomberg Short-Term Bank Yield Index. And it's comprised of taking all these different products that transact on our platforms electronically and putting them all into a big stew, and then using, for all you statisticians out there, using a linear regression to curve fit all those data points and imply an overnight 1 month, 3 month, 6 month, and 12-month rate, which can be used as a proxy or as a substitute for LIBOR. Our correlations have been very high. And as I said, the products that we're taking off our transaction platforms are the same products that banks are using to fund themselves. So it would make sense that the correlation is high. So we've had several conversations with the Fed. They're encouraging us to move forward. We've had conversations with many of the large money center banks, and they're quite supportive of us. So we continue to move forward. We're already publishing it on the Bloomberg Terminal in what we call an indicative manner, and probably sometime in the middle of January, it will be in full production for the market to start using and ultimately start basing lending off of.
Well, that's really exciting stuff, and some really great information for students to hear, especially economics and finance students. You just got some really raw language about how the words we use in your industry, so really good there. I want to pass you off to Nicole Rohr.
Hi, I was just wondering if you could tell us a little bit about your experience of launching new product lines, including e-trading of bonds.
Great question. I look at it this way. I have the best job in the world because creating new products and satisfying clients' demands is a lot of fun. Sometimes it's frustrating if you're creating something that our clients are kind of set in their ways. So getting them to move over to that sometimes can be difficult. And I'll tell you this, that in 1992, I started my own company for electronic trading of bonds. We were way, way early, and that was quite frustrating. But now, since then, within the past, I would say 5 to 8 years, electronic trading of bonds has become far more popular. And now Bloomberg, obviously, I was involved in our product launches there. We're a major platform for electronic trading. I would say it's Bloomberg, TradeWeb, and Market Access. Those are the three big ones, and very exciting. You know, when a client basically says, "Oh, this solves a problem for me that I haven't been able to solve," it's quite gratifying.
I'm sure you've seen the movie, but are we going to be seeing The Big Short Part 2 with commercial mortgage-backed securities as revealed in the credit default swaps market?
Great question. Great question. In my opinion, and it's my opinion only, I say no. And I'll tell you, there's a couple of things that are different this time around. But you're right. If you think about the commercial mortgage-backed market and you think about the securitization of leases that are on many of the commercial properties, and you see what's gone on so far since COVID, you know, you've got bankruptcies of big names like Brooks Brothers, Sears, GNC. So when you go into these malls and you remember seeing all those companies, they're going out of business. They're not going to be able to pay the leases on the mortgage-backed securities that investors have had. But I think the big difference this time around is that it didn't come as, while it came as a big surprise, the market sold off, and we have an index that we look at called the CMBX index, which is a index made up of 25 CDSs. So it kind of represents the market. It was trading around 100, and now it's trading around 73. During March, it traded down to about 69, and now it's kind of stabilized for most of the year. I think the Fed certainly, this time around, the Fed has said in advance that they will support the markets. We saw what they did in the commercial paper market. They jumped in. We saw what they did in the corporate bond market. We saw what they did even with ETFs, purchasing ETFs. So I think the Fed will certainly help here. I know there's a plan, and obviously in Washington, sometimes they can't all agree, but there's a plan called HOPE, which obviously would help sort of liquefy that market. So I don't think you have the same dynamics. It didn't hit everybody as a big surprise. And what I will tell you is, a lot of people after 2008 made a lot of money buying distressed mortgages and basically being very selective about what they picked and then building a portfolio that way. I think if people are quite selective in the distressed CMBS market now, there will be a lot of opportunity to make money. And frankly, if you look at CMBS, there's all different types of leases in there. The places that are really a problem right now are retail and hospitality. Nobody's staying in hotels, and obviously retail we've talked about. But the biggest part of CMBS is still multifamily, and they're still paying, so they're still doing well.
Let me interject before Catie asks her question. Just a quick reference. The Big Short is reference to the movie, of course, about the Great Recession and the housing crisis, 2008, 2009. Catie, go ahead.
I've heard of the importance of having a Bloomberg terminal for investors, traders, and economists. What is the Bloomberg terminal?
So the Bloomberg Terminal is something that's been around since 1982. Mike Bloomberg, long time ago, recognized that data was very important. And in particular, in the bond market, where there was not a lot of transparency of price. So if you were an investor and you were buying a security, you might not know whether the offering that was being given to you was a good offering or a bad offering. So he decided to basically take a lot of data, particularly making more transparency of pricing, and build this terminal. And originally, the Bloomberg Terminal was a fixed box that sat on everybody's desk. We actually were the first people to have our own internet. It was all wired across the country and then around the world. And obviously, I think since 2001, we've then used the internet to basically do it. So now the Bloomberg Terminal is basically a license that gives you a screen on any computer that you want. And basically, you can bring in pricing, you can bring in data about markets, you can bring in news, you can bring in analytics. So it's basically the terminal for professional investors. And I would say if you're a fixed income professional investor and you don't have a Bloomberg terminal, you're in a bad spot because it really is the fixed income community.
Well, David, I want to thank you so much for that fantastic interview. Very informative for the students. A pleasure to have you. I want to wish you happy holidays to you and your family. Thanks so much.
Same to you, Frank. Thanks. Anytime.
See you again soon.
Bye-bye.
All right, so that was a great interview. And of course, we're going to have to push this out because a lot of good information in that interview. We've had a bunch of great guests here. I think the students can really learn from. Okay, let's move on. Mr. Murphy, we want to talk about stimulus. Let's get back to the economy and markets. Negotiations are ongoing in Congress regarding stimulus, right, to help with the impacts from the lockdowns of COVID. Debates are still struggling, but the president and his team has some things to say. What's happening with these stimulus negotiations?
White House proposes to dramatically lower unemployment benefits in exchange for a $600 stimulus check. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin has proposed that lawmakers approve another stimulus check worth $600 per person and $600 per child. The people familiar with the plan said, speaking on the condition of anonymity, to share details of private deliberations. The new White House proposal was a non-starter for Democrats and a sharp rejection of the bipartisan efforts that have brought the two parties closer to a compromise on a legislative package amid signs that the U.S. economy is deteriorating under the increasing strain of the coronavirus. Under the bipartisan framework released last week by a group of moderate lawmakers, Congress would approve about $180 billion in new federal unemployment benefits for tens of millions of jobless Americans. That will be enough to fund federal supplementary unemployment benefits at $300 per week, while extending various unemployment programs that are set to expire at the end of the year. The framework did not include another round of stimulus payments. By contrast, Mnuchin has submitted a plan to provide about $40 billion in new funding for federal unemployment benefits. Mnuchin's plan would extend expiring benefits but does not include any supplementary federal benefit, meaning millions of workers would receive no additional federal help, one person familiar with the plan said. A spokeswoman for the Treasury Department declined to comment. The stimulus checks have divided economists as well as lawmakers. Some economists point out that the millions of stimulus checks were received by families that are prospering economically and have not lost jobs or suffered pay cuts, arguing that they were poorly targeted for the current crisis. Other economists have said that the checks helped stabilize a turbulent economy and reached many people struggling economically, who were denied unemployment benefits or other forms of social insurance. An August analysis by the Urban Institute, a centrist think tank, found that additional stimulus checks would keep 6.3 million people out of poverty.
Okay, really tough negotiations going on there. Good report there, Jake. We don't have the money, by the way. Any money we have in this stimulus deal will be borrowed from the Fed, from China, from Japan, from Saudi Arabia, from the EU, right, from households across America, because we're $27.3 trillion in debt. So the idea of targeting precisely seems to make some sense. But nonetheless, the lockdowns continue to hurt millions of Americans, and the V-shaped recovery is turning into a W. All right, that leads us there on the hot topics. Time for data for the week ending December 11th. Start us off, Nicole.
All right, on Friday, we have November Producer Price Index up 0.1% and up 1.4% year over year. And December U-Michigan Consumer Sentiment 81.4 versus 76.9 in November.
For Thursday, initial unemployment claims week ending 12-5, 853,000 versus 712,000 in prior week. November Consumer Price Index up 0.2% and up 1.6% year over year. November federal budget balance, a deficit of $145 billion versus a deficit of $284 billion in October.
On Wednesday, the WBA mortgage applications week ending December 4th down 1.2% versus down 0.6% in prior weeks.
On Tuesday, quarter three non-farm productivity up 4.6% versus up 10.6% in quarter two. Quarter three unit labor costs down 6.6% versus up 9% in quarter two.
On Friday, no data. How about for this week? What's happening with data for this week? RJ, start us off.
On Monday, there was no data.
For Tuesday, December Empire State Manufacturing Index, November Capacity Utilization Industrial Production, October Treasury International Capital Flows.
On Wednesday, we have MBA mortgage applications, week ending 12/11, November retail sales, and we also get the Federal Reserve interest rate decision and FOMC statement.
On Thursday, the initial unemployment claims week ending December 12th, November housing starts, December Philadelphia Federal Index.
And on Friday, no data. Okay, we check on data because it's important for investors and traders and it impacts markets. Of course, the highlight from what we just talked about was the big rise in initial unemployment claims last week. And that's beginning to build that W-shaped recovery that we're fearful of, right? So we're seeing more weak data, more MBA mortgage applications down 2 weeks in a row, not good signs. There's a pricing problem. Prices have really gone up dramatically. So a lot of people have been priced out of the housing market. This week coming up, we'll pay attention to the Federal Reserve meeting on Wednesday. All right, so now we'll check in with markets for the week. This is for the week ending December 11th, just a week-over-week change here. Start us off, please, Rahill.
S&P 500, 3,663, down 36 points.
NASDAQ was 12,377, down 86 points.
3-month Treasury, 0.076%, down 1 basis point.
10-year Treasury, 0.896%, down 8 basis points.
30-year Treasury, 1.628%, down 11 basis points.
The euro dollar, 1.2110, down 10 pips.
Dollar yen, 104.01, down 13 pips.
Sterling, 1.322, down 220 pips.
Dollar CAD, 1.2770, down 10 pips.
West Texas Intermediate, $46.56, up 45 cents.
Brent, $49.97, up 72 cents.
Gasoline, $1.31, up 5 cents.
Gold, $1,843, up $1.50.
All right, and that catches up with markets. The highlights there, of course, weakening dollar continues to be the trend, okay? The highlight of the week in foreign exchange market was really the losses for sterling, but nonetheless, the dollar weakness remains the theme. And of course, you cannot keep a good equity market down. Equities keep rallying on the back of positive COVID news with respect to the vaccines. All right, we're almost done with our show. It's time for our friendly reminder. Start us off, Catie.
Do your reading.
Do your homework.
Come to class prepared.
Use your blinker when making turns or switching lanes.
Stop signs mean stop.
And no texting while driving.
All right, that's it for us. Thank you to our great team, Rahill, Jaiswal, our special guest, Catie Baer from the Feminist Club at King, Nicole, Ward, Jake Murphy. As always, please find the KingCast at kingschoolct.org, campus life page. Tell your friends and family. That's it for us. We're out of here. Happy holidays to everybody.